Thomas Reed pushed his cleaning cart down the 42nd floor hallway, the wheels squeaking softly against polished marble. Through the glass walls he could see the city spread out below, glittering in the late afternoon sun. He'd worked as a janitor at Sterling Tower for 6 years, long enough to become invisible. People walked past him without a glance, continuing their important conversations as if he weren't there. That was fine with Thomas. He had his son to think about. 8-year-old Daniel, who was waiting at aftercare until Thomas finished his shift, who needed new shoes and school supplies, and a father who showed up every single day. Thomas had been a different person once, a marketing executive with a corner office and a bright future. Then his wife died suddenly, leaving him alone with a toddler in grief so heavy he could barely breathe. He'd fallen apart, lost his job, lost almost everything. But he'd clawed his way back for Daniel, took whatever work he could find. Janitor paid the bills and let him be home for bedtime. That was enough. As Thomas approached the main conference room, he heard raised voices. He paused, uncertain whether to enter. "You'll sign the contract, or I'll destroy you." The voice was cold, feminine, unmistakable. Victoria Sterling, the billionaire CEO who owned this building and half the city besides. Thomas had seen her from a distance. Blonde, beautiful, and according to office gossip, absolutely ruthless. "Miss Sterling, please be reasonable," a man's voice pleaded. "These terms would bankrupt my company. Then you should have read the contract before agreeing to meet. I don't waste time on negotiations." Thomas knew he should leave. This wasn't his business. But something in the other man's voice, the desperate edge of someone being cornered, made him hesitate. He'd heard that tone before. In his own voice, years ago, when the world was crushing him. Thomas pushed open the door. 6 people stood frozen in tableau around the conference table. Victoria Sterling in a red dress that demanded attention, several executives in expensive suits, and one older man who looked like he might be sick, his face gray with stress. Everyone turned to stare at Thomas. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I can come back to clean." "Yes, do that," Victoria snapped, turning back to her prey. But Thomas found himself speaking again. "Excuse me, Miss Sterling. May I say something?" The room went silent. Victoria Sterling turned slowly, her expression a mix of disbelief and irritation. "Did the janitor just interrupt my meeting?" "Yes, ma'am. I apologize, but I think you should reconsider your position." Her eyes narrowed dangerously. "You think I should reconsider my business decisions? Based on your extensive experience in what, exactly? Mopping floors?" "Based on my experience being human," Thomas said steadily. "That man you're threatening, he's terrified. You can see it in his face. Whatever you're asking him to sign, it's going to ruin him. That's not my concern. Business is business." "Business is people," Thomas countered. "Real people with families, and bills, and lives that matter just as much as yours does." One of the executives gasped. "You can't speak to Miss Sterling that way." But Victoria held up a hand, studying Thomas with new interest. "What's your name?" "Thomas Reed." "Well, Thomas Reed, you have approximately 30 seconds to explain why I shouldn't have security escort you out of this building permanently." Thomas thought of Daniel, of the job he desperately needed. But he also thought of the gray-faced man behind Victoria, and he couldn't walk away. "6 years ago, I was where he is now," Thomas said, gesturing to the businessman. "Drowning, desperate. Someone offered me a deal that would have saved my business but cost me my integrity. I turned it down, lost everything anyway. Ended up here, pushing a cleaning cart." He met Victoria's eyes directly. "But I can still look at myself in the mirror. Can you? When you destroy people for profit, when you use your power to crush instead of build, what do you see when you look at your reflection?" The silence was absolute. Victoria's expression was unreadable. "I see a winner," she said finally. "Someone who worked her way from nothing to everything, who doesn't apologize for being successful." "Success at the cost of your humanity isn't success," Thomas said. "It's just expensive loneliness." Victoria's jaw tightened. "You know nothing about my life. I know what I see in your eyes, the same thing I used to see in mine. Someone who's forgotten what they're fighting for." For a long moment, no one moved. Then Victoria walked slowly toward Thomas. She stopped close enough that he could see the calculation in her expression. the wheels turning behind her eyes. "You're fired," she said quietly. Thomas nodded. He'd expected that. "Yes, ma'am. Wait in the hallway. We're not done." Confused but obedient, Thomas stepped outside. Through the glass walls, he watched Victoria turn back to the businessman. 20 minutes later, the conference room doors opened. The executives filed out, looking shell-shocked. The older businessman emerged last, his face transformed. He stopped in front of Thomas. "I don't know what you did," he said, voice shaking, but she changed the terms. "Fair terms. You saved my company. You saved my employees' jobs. Thank you." He shook Thomas's hand firmly and left. Victoria appeared in the doorway. "Thomas Reed, come with me." She led him to her office, a sprawling space that occupied an entire corner of the building. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered views in two directions. Everything was glass and chrome in cold perfection. Victoria poured 2 drinks from a crystal decanter. She handed one to Thomas, who took it uncertainly. "I should hate you," she said, studying him. "You humiliated me in front of my executives. You questioned my judgment. You implied I'm a terrible person. I'm..." "Sorry," Thomas said, though he wasn't really. "Don't apologize. You were right." Victoria took a long drink. "I've spent 20 years building this empire. Started with nothing. Foster care, no family, no advantages. Everything I have, I took. I fought for it." She stared out at the city. "Somewhere along the way, I forgot there was any other way to be. Attack or be attacked. Win or lose. Crush or be crushed. It doesn't have to be that way," Thomas said gently. "How would you know? You're a janitor who lost everything." "Exactly, I lost everything. And I learned that some things matter more than winning. My son matters. Being able to sleep at night matters. Treating people with dignity matters." Victoria turned to face him. "Tell me about your son." So Thomas did. He told her about Daniel, about his wife's death, about the long climb back from rock bottom, about choosing a simple life because it was honest and real, and let him be the father Daniel deserved. Victoria listened without interrupting. When he finished, she refilled her drink. "I never wanted children," she said. "Never wanted anything that could be used as leverage against me. Now I'm 43 years old, and I have everything money can buy and no one to share it with." "It's not too late," Thomas said. "Isn't it? Look at me. I'm the villain in other people's stories, the ruthless billionaire who destroys everything she touches. Then stop being that person. Choose differently." Victoria laughed bitterly. "You make it sound so simple." "It is simple. Not easy, but simple. You decide what kind of person you want to be, and you make that choice every single day." She studied him for a long moment. "You're not at all what I expected when I fired you. You said we weren't done. What did you mean?" Victoria sat behind her massive desk. "I have a proposition, not the threatening kind I was offering earlier, a real one." Thomas waited. "I need someone to keep me honest," Victoria said. "Someone who isn't afraid to tell me when I'm wrong. Someone who sees people instead of assets. I want to offer you a position." "Doing what?" "I'm calling it Director of Human Interests. You'll attend my meetings, review my deals, advise me on the human impact of my decisions, push back when I'm being ruthless instead of reasonable." Thomas stared at her. "You want to hire me to argue with you? I want to hire you to remind me why any of this matters, to be the conscience I've spent 20 years ignoring." She named a salary that made Thomas's head spin. "Why?" he asked. "Why would you do this?" "Because in 30 seconds you made me feel something I haven't felt in years. Shame, and then hope. You reminded me that I'm human, not just a machine designed to generate profit." Victoria's expression softened. "And because you have a son who needs shoes and school supplies, and a father who can be there for him without working 3 jobs." "How did you know about the shoes?" "I notice more than people think. I've seen you counting change in the break room, wearing the same worn shirt 3 days in a row." "You're struggling, Thomas. Let me help." "In exchange for what? My soul?" Victoria smiled, the first genuine smile Thomas had seen from her. "In exchange for helping me find mine again." Thomas thought about Daniel, about being able to afford more than survival, about having the chance to make a real difference in how this powerful woman wielded her influence. "I want Thursdays off," he said. for Daniel's school activities. Done. And I want you to reconsider how you treat your lowest paid employees. Living wages, better benefits. You're negotiating already. I like it. Agreed. Then yes, I'll take the job. 6 months later, Thomas stood in the same conference room where everything had changed. But this time, he sat at the table instead of pushing a cleaning cart past it. Victoria presented a merger proposal to a small tech startup. The founders, nervous young entrepreneurs, braced for the worst. "These are the terms," Victoria said, sliding documents across the table. "You'll notice they're unusually favorable to you. My advisor suggested I stop crushing people's dreams and start building them instead." She glanced at Thomas, who nodded approval. "This is a partnership," Victoria continued. "You bring innovation and passion. I bring resources and experience. We build something together instead of me simply absorbing you." The entrepreneurs looked stunned. "This isn't what we expected." "No," Victoria agreed. 6 months ago it wouldn't have been what you got. But I'm learning that there's more than one way to be successful. That power can build up instead of tear down." After the meeting, Victoria and Thomas walked to the elevator. "How did I do?" she asked. "Better, though you could have smiled more. Baby steps, Thomas. Baby steps." They'd developed an easy rapport over the months. Victoria was still demanding, still brilliant, still formidable. But she'd softened in ways that surprised everyone who knew her. She'd started a scholarship fund for foster kids, revised contracts to be fair instead of predatory, showed up at company events and actually talked to employees instead of just appearing for photo opportunities. The board had been skeptical at first, but profits hadn't declined. If anything, the company's reputation had improved. Talented people wanted to work for a CEO who valued them as humans, not just assets. "Are you coming to Daniel's school play tonight?" Thomas asked as they reached the lobby. "Wouldn't miss it." "What's he playing again?" "A tree, but he's very excited about it." Victoria laughed. "A tree, that's perfect." She'd become part of their small family in unexpected ways. Showing up for Daniel's events, joining them for pizza on Friday nights, teaching Daniel chess while Thomas cooked dinner in the modest apartment Victoria had helped them upgrade to. She was learning what it meant to be connected, to care. About people not for what they could provide, but simply because they mattered. That evening, Thomas sat in a school auditorium between his son's teacher and Victoria Sterling, watching Daniel stand very still with his arms raised like branches. "He's really committing to the role," Victoria whispered. "He's a very dedicated tree," Thomas agreed. After the play, Daniel ran to them, beaming. "Did you see me? I didn't move even when Jeremy bumped into me." "You were magnificent," Victoria said seriously. "Best tree I've ever seen." Daniel hugged her spontaneously. Victoria's expression shifted, something vulnerable crossing her face. She hugged him back carefully, as if afraid she might break him. "Can Victoria come for ice cream with us?" Daniel asked. "If she wants to," Thomas said. "I want to," Victoria said quietly very much later, watching Daniel demolish a sundae while telling Victoria all about his next school project. Thomas reflected on how much had changed. He'd been a janitor with nothing to lose, speaking truth to power because someone needed to. And somehow, impossibly, it had transformed 2 lives. Victoria caught him looking at her and smiled. Not the cold, calculated smile she showed in boardrooms, but something real and warm. "Thank you," she mouthed. Thomas nodded. He understood what she was thanking him for. Not just the job or the guidance or the pushback when she needed it, but for seeing her as human when she'd forgotten how to be one. For reminding her that wealth means nothing without connection. For teaching her that the most powerful thing any person can do is choose kindness over cruelty, building over destroying, love over loneliness. She'd spent 20 years building an empire, but a single dad janitor had taught her how to build a life, and that, they both understood now, was worth more than all the money in the world. The end. If this story reminded you that courage comes in unexpected forms, please like, share, and subscribe for more tales about standing up for what's right. Leave a comment telling us about a time you spoke truth to power, or when someone's courage inspired you to change. Your story might give someone else the strength they need today.